Everybody loves a good conspiracy, and there are a lot of conspiracies in Phantasy Star Online. You've got Ragall, photons, black markets, and the entire Pioneer Project, to name a few. But in a world of so many conspiracies, it makes sense that there will be some people just trying to find out the truth about everything. And there is no better man for the job than a mysterious ranger only named Bernie. Bernie is a curious case. Maybe you only see him for a single quest, and maybe you walk away thinking he knows more than he says he does. But he has a habit of showing up at random times and sharing information that normal hunters really shouldn't know. So just who is this guy? What exactly convinced him to come all the way to Ragall, and does he ever find the answers that he's looking for? Let's take a look at what Bernie is truly about. If you've already watched the first two parts of this series, you'll be familiar with how we begin. The Japanese-only Material Collections book can give us a brief look into Bernie's life prior to the game's events, and he definitely has a bit of history to him that never really gets brought up in-game. For example, Bernie spent 10 years fighting as a mercenary back on the home planet of Corral. At some point, he met a swordsman by the name of Zoke Miyama and started working with him to fight against the Corral government. Because of all of this experience, he's got quite a bit of knowledge on the inner workings of the government, and got a reputation for handling more secretive work. If you've met Bernie in-game before, this might all come as a surprise, as he does not seem like someone with a decade of mercenary work under his belt. Also, that's only the first half of his biography, but we'll get to the rest later on. Right now, it's time to enter the game and meet him ourselves. One of the first quests in the game is offered by a self-described travel agency. They want you to look for any survivors of a pleasure ship called the Grand Squall, which departed for Ragall just before the explosion and has since lost communication. Other hunters have been assigned to the mission, but you're explicitly told not to talk with them. So instead, let's see what people on board have to say. One person has his doubts that a cruiser full of civilians would even be allowed to land on the surface yet, and a woman nearby talks about how she met a certain Great Sword Zoke a few days ago. This Zoke usually travels with an android and apparently was seen with a ranger this time instead. Not too sure what that's all about, but we have a mission to do. And sure enough, it isn't long before we see someone else looking for information. He's just as in the dark about things as we are, and that goes for the next guy we meet as well, who tries to cut a deal with you, but there really aren't any leads right now. To make matters worse, as we try to go forward, right ahead, the door is broken. Things are just not going well right now, so with no choice, we turn around and start to look elsewhere. In a clearing nearby, we find a ranger standing around by himself. Talking to the man, he humbly wants our opinion on whether or not we believe that the Grand Squall is just a simple pleasure ship. Well, we've got no reason not to believe it, and in response, the man thinks this is incredibly funny. Seeing how naive we clearly are about this, the man wants to join us and share a little bit of what he knows. So Bernie joins the party, and off the two of us go. He starts by asking you if this story really adds up. Was the Grand Squall really just a simple luxury cruiser? And does it make sense that it would depart for Ragall before any official contact with Pioneer 1? It's something to think about before we meet our nemesis, the Broken Door, once again. This time though, Bernie wants to take a look, and it's not long before he's able to get the door open. I guess he really does have a knack for this sort of thing. Clearing out the next room with him, Bernie drops the subtlety and starts to be more honest with you about what's going on. This luxury cruise represented by that travel agency, that's just made up. Bernie does confirm that the Grand Squall is an actual ship, but it's aligned with the military for a purpose that he hasn't quite figured out. He has a contact that confirmed the existence of a survivor, so he's looking for them under the guise of this whole luxury cruise business. After fighting your way deeper into the forest, Bernie shares a little more about the survivor he's looking for. It's a woman who apparently has a chip in her body to record some kind of data from her. He's not sure what the military is getting at here, but he has a device that can track the chip so it's easier to locate her. And locate her we start to do, with Bernie being grateful for you fighting your way alongside him. At the end of the road, close to the central dome, the two of you find a woman collapsed on the ground. This is exactly who Bernie is looking for, and he wants you to turn in the quest as he sticks around to make sure that she's okay. Before leaving, he promises he won't betray you for helping him out, but he can be a little forgetful sometimes. And that is how we're officially introduced to Bernie. The man who is absolutely not working for the military wants to confirm nobody else saw that woman except the two of you. And with that, mission accomplished. But it was a weird mission. All we know is that the military is up to some weird stuff. We don't know what they were doing, nor do we learn the name of the woman that we saved, but maybe that'll all be brought up later on. For now, our story moves into the mines as we look for information about Pioneer 1. There's just a small hurdle of getting attacked by another hunter, but we work with a woman named Sue to download some information about research that Pioneer 1 conducted. Later on, we return to the mines to escort a scientist, but this time we can see Bernie down here as well. Oh, and Sue is here again too, but she's less than happy to see you snooping around. She gives you a not-so-subtle warning about the information you're looking for and brings up two names: Black Paper, an organization, and Black Hound, an individual. That doesn't sound too good, so let's finally connect with Bernie and hear what he has to say. His forgetfulness kicks in a little, but he thinks he remembers you. He definitely remembers the woman you just talked to though, and he'd like to know what she talked about. And that sounds fair enough. I mean, he told us about the Grand Squall and all that, so let's share some information with him. Bernie starts to clear up some of the things that Sue told us. This Black Paper she brought up is, well, a black market organization that's doing some real shady business on Pioneer 2. As for the Black Hound, that is their personal executioner. Bernie starts to catch on that you're probably getting way over your head, and he tells you to be a little careful from now on. And another thing, that Sue woman we met is also working for Black Paper. Normally this means that we should stay far away from her, but we're not normal hunters now, are we? As we continue to pester Sue for more answers, we can also find Bernie doing his own thing down in Regal. Following our last meeting, he assumes we haven't met the Black Hound yet by the sheer virtue of us still being alive. Even so, this whole thing is weird. Bernie correctly guesses that we just stumbled across something related to Pioneer 1, and now we're getting way too deep into things. He then tells us a lot more about Black Paper, and that they aren't just a black market organization. In fact, Black Paper is sanctioned by the same governmental authority that started the Pioneer project, so them being involved in Regal is way more than just simple black market business. And considering Bernie was fighting against this authority back on Corral, it's a good guess he's invested in finding out what's going on. As the conversation ends, he tells us he's looking into this with someone else and they would like any help you could give. I have to say, Black Paper being directed by the government from the shadows is not something I expected, but when you work as a mercenary for 10 years, I guess you just start to pick up on things like this. In a later quest, we can find him once again, looking deeper into the caves. He's happy to see that we're still alive, and finally realizes that neither of us have officially shared names. In true localization fashion, he says his name is Barney. Nice to meet you, Barney. Anyways, he circles back on the conversation from last time, wanting to know if you could help him discover what's going on deeper underground. Just as he's about to convince you, the area is hit by an earthquake and he makes a quick exit right after. Whatever that earthquake was is clearly not a good sign, and things only start to ramp up from here. By the time we next meet him, the government has discovered the ruins deep below the surface. We personally haven't gone there yet though, as we're in the mines once again when we see Bernie. He's still trying to be in high spirits, but someone who was working with him had just passed away, and the unanswered questions are starting to pile up. While he also hasn't been to the ruins, he learned that there was a lot of Pioneer 1 debris down there. The conclusion he comes to is that whatever lies in the ruins is responsible for Pioneer 1's destruction, and he takes that as his cue to leave. As the ruins are being further looked into, and people are trying to put the pieces together, a quest shows up in the Hunters Guild. An android named Shino is looking for her master who is missing on Regal. The name of her master is Zoke Miyama, the legendary swordsman who worked with Bernie so many years ago, and the same Zoke Miyama that was recently seen with a ranger rather than the android he normally travels with. Shino has been in the Miyama family for generations, so his disappearance is causing some serious concern. She's not built for combat either, so she has no choice but to ask us for help. With that, it's time we enter the ruins. It's not long into the journey before Shino remembers the last time she saw Zoke. In the flashback, he orders her to return to Pioneer 2 as she can't defend herself from the creatures in the ruins. Importantly, Zoke is accompanied by his comrade, Bernie, who expresses his doubts on sending her back. The flashback then ends, and with no life signs detected on this floor, the two of you proceed deeper into the ruins. Shortly into the second level, another earthquake is felt, is what we've come to believe, but Shino informs us that whatever is causing these quakes, it's not a natural phenomenon. Finally, she starts to pick up on Zoke's presence, or at least the signals coming from his weapons. After clearing a room of monsters, Shino finds one of his swords on the floor. Another signal shows up, and she's confident that her master is nearby. But on the way there, after turning a corner, Bernie can be found on the floor, motionless. Despite sustaining heavy injuries, he's able to talk, and he reveals that, all this time, he had no personal investment in what was going on in Ragal, or the plans of the government, or really any of that. Zoke was the one who helped save him from a life as a mercenary, so all he wanted to do is help him in return. Before falling into unconsciousness, he curses himself for being too weak, and lets out the name of his master and their family android. With no choice but to find out the truth, you leave Bernie behind and carve through the monsters that overpowered him. In the next room, another one of Zoke's swords can be found. Suddenly, another quake is felt, and Shino detects her master's third and final sword in the next room. The two of you proceed forward, and what you find is Zoke, collapsed and still holding his final weapon. The swordsman recognizes Shino and chastises her for following them this far. Feeling his death quickly approaching, Zoke asks her for a final favor. Tell everyone aboard Pioneer 2 to flee this planet as soon as possible. He also tells her that she's free from servitude and can finally live her own life. His last words before passing are, "Please do as you wish." Shino is wordless for a moment, and then comes to the conclusion that she will remain by her master's side. She considers the warning Zoke gave her, but decides that it's more important to stay with him. The android thanks you for accompanying her and says you're free to return to Pioneer 2. And finally, pledging to her fallen master she will always accompany him, she enters stasis and ceases functioning. And that is how this quest ends. Bernie wasn't strong enough to save his comrade, whom he followed all the way to Ragal out of sheer loyalty. The last we see of him is his seemingly lifeless body. And if you read Bernie's article in the Phantasy Star Wiki, this is where he ultimately loses his life. But sometimes, wikis don't have the full story. Zoke was considered one of the three legendary swordsmen of his generation. The other two were Heathcliff Flowen and a man named Donoff Baz, and they all considered each other close friends. At one point in time, all three of them served the government, but Donoff and eventually Zoke would defect, each for their own reasons. Reports have already come in on Flowen's death, and we've just learned the fate of Zoke, so that leaves one more legendary swordsman unaccounted for. The final quest that concludes Bernie's story in episode 1 is called The Retired Hunter. This is where we meet Donoff face to face. To put it simply, Donoff's life's goal is to defeat 10,000 monsters, and when he retired 10 years ago, he only had 99 to go. And now, feeling the end of his life drawing close, he wants to finally make that dream come true. After explaining the urgency of this request, Donoff then makes his way into the ruins, and we shortly follow after him, but out of the corner of our eyes, a certain ranger can be seen. Bernie somehow managed to fight his way back to Pioneer 2, but his normal cheerful demeanor is long gone. He considers it sheer luck that he's still standing, and he wants to make the most of the time that fate has given him. Normally, this is where we would meet Donoff in the ruins and begin the quest proper, but something happens when we return to Pioneer 2 with him and talk to Bernie. The two of them start to talk amongst each other, and we can only pick up small bits of the conversation. Bernie tells Donoff not to worry about an unnamed woman, and that she's a strong person. He then tells the legendary swordsman that he doesn't want her, or others that seem to be involved, to keep trying to follow his legacy. This raises a few questions, but we don't have time to think too much about them. Donoff chose us to fulfill his final request, and we shall do so. Carving through the last monster, Donoff thanks us for making his dream come true. And as we're just about to make it back to Pioneer 2, his illness catches up with him, and finally being at peace, Donoff passes away. Before turning in the quest, Bernie realizes what's become of the legendary swordsman and can only express his displeasure. With Donoff's death, the last of the legendary swordsmen have passed away, and Bernie is left to contemplate on their legacy. With this, Bernie's story, as the man tied to the heroes of the past, comes to an end. We'll circle back on everything up to this point, but Bernie makes a few more appearances down the road that are worth mentioning. In episode 2, he joins a group of hunters in a virtual adaptation exam and works alongside Ash, someone that we meet very early on in episode 1. The exam starts to get corrupted by the AI that's overseeing it, and unlike seemingly everyone else who tries to fight it, Bernie senses that something is up and smartly makes his escape. Then, much later on, he's one of the characters that shows up in episode 4, and we can talk to him face to face once again. It's been around 2 years since we last spoke to him, and it looks like he's back to his normal cheerful self. He also gives you a monomate. What a guy. Later talks with him are focused on a certain purple Phonueral, specifically the one that we saved when we first met. And no, he doesn't mean a purple hue cast, and that's probably the exact opposite of who we're talking about here. Well, this woman, named Rupika, has been taken by a commander in the military for use in one of their experiments, and Bernie, who saved her once before, would consider himself a failure for letting her down after promising her safety. As the story progresses, he starts to get more desperate for any leads on Rupika's location. She's eventually saved by a certain pair that we may have met before, and is kept hidden for the time being. Then later on, Bernie sensed that something is off in that particular location, and lo and behold, finds Rupika and brings her back to Pioneer 2. Unfortunately, for reasons that are much better explained in a different video, Rupika sneaks away again and returns to the military's control. This leaves Bernie in a bad state, and he's left wondering what exactly is going on here. He later teams up with Ash once again as they continue to explore together, before an oh-so-familiar earthquake is felt and he starts to lose confidence in himself. Thanks to Ash bringing him back to reality, Bernie remembers the kind of person he used to be, going to any length to fulfill his promises. And with that, his appearance in episode 4 comes to a close, as does his story in general. There are a lot of threads in Bernie's story, connecting him to all sorts of characters and organizations, so it's hard to summarize him as a whole. This makes him quite different from the other characters we've learned about, whose stories exist mostly within the game or needed their backstory to fully comprehend. But even without reading his biography, it was obvious that Bernie had a lot of history based on how much he shared with us. The truth behind the Grand Squall, Black Paper's secret leadership, and Pioneer 1's involvement in the explosion on Ragal. Bernie himself had no interest in learning the truth about these things, but his loyalty to Zoke gave him the strength to fight alongside him. Whatever the legendary swordsman saw in this 10-year mercenary veteran, it's clear his judgment was not misplaced. And even when Zoke fell to the ruins, Bernie's willpower allowed him to not share the same fate and live to fight another day. Also, his conversations with Donoff suggest the two of them have known each other for a long time. While we don't know the specifics, it's obvious Donoff and Zoke had a lot of trust in him, and it's possible he even met Floen at one point. I doubt Bernie could ever consider himself at the same level as the three legendary swordsmen, but in terms of people with the physical and mental strength to fight for what they believe, nobody else comes close. Until now, the three legendary swordsmen weren't ever properly brought up. Despite their reputation and the occasional passing conversation on Pioneer 2, it doesn't sound like their legacies were widely remembered, and that's what makes Bernie's loyalty to Zoke that much more important. The heroes of the past must be remembered, and their strength serve as a beacon for future generations. That's how it was for Floen, Zoke, and Donoff, and that's how it'll eventually be for you as well. After all, your character becomes one of the 4 heroes. There is one question that you may still have after all this. In his conversation with Donoff, we overheard Bernie mentioning an unnamed woman. Well, to finish things off, let's go over the second half of Bernie's biography. In Pioneer 2, Zoke and the other members of their group investigated the mystery of Pioneer 1 and the government's actions, but a series of strange incidents in Ragal's underground resulted in the deaths of everyone except for Bernie. Currently, it appears he's working with Alicia Boz, who could be considered a reminder of heroes such as Zoke, Donoff, and Floen. So just who is this Alicia Boz that Bernie is working with? Well, that is a story for another day. You want to know what I think though? Take a look at this artwork celebrating the 3-year anniversary of Blue Burst. There's a cake ready for everyone, but there's only one person who gives the cake his personal approval with a thumbs up. Clearly this means Bernie retires from his work.